Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, rescue workers flock to the Libyan coast as a bout of good weather prompts an uptick in the number of African migrants risking the dangerous trip to Europe. Thousands are picked up by emergency vessels. Also, thousands more people are left homeless in Lagos as the local government continues the demolition policy despite a court order against it. Our correspondents report on the most recent evictions from Otodo Gbame. And whilst parts of Durban are notorious for its neglected buildings and violent gang wars, authorities do what they can to clean up some aspects of the city's image. But it's a makeover with a ways to go. But first, a young boy was amongst at least 7 bodies found by rescue workers who worked through the weekend trying to pick up thousands of African would-be migrants off the Libyan coast. It's thought the initially good weather going into the weekend prompted a spike in the numbers of people risking the dangerous sea journey towards Europe. Simon Harding tells us more.
Thousands are saved every week. On Sunday, a German Navy ship, the Rhine, recovered more than 1,000 migrants, most of them fleeing poverty in sub-Saharan Africa. The ship was taken to Catania in Sicily, where it made port, and the rescued people were given much-needed provisions.
When we finished our rescue operations, we had altogether 1,181 persons that we saved from distress. We supplied them with food, with some warm clothes, and as we can say, now we start to get them to the port, and most of them are in a general good condition.
So far this year, more than 30,000 people have arrived in Italy after being rescued by military ships or private charities. Easter weekend was one of the busiest ever, as in excess of 5,000 people were salvaged from the sea, but at least 7 drowned as aid workers struggled to cope with the amount of migrants. Despite slowing since 2015, the migrant crisis has surged in recent weeks, with experts saying that the good weather is pushing people to cross, some not for the first time.
We have one particular case of a man who has tried to cross the Mediterranean already 3 times, and on the second attempt he's been detained, was put in jail for more than a year in Libya. He's been tortured several times. Now he arrived here, and we hope that he would find a better life here in Italy.
An estimated 826 people have already died or are missing since the turn of the year. Italy has now welcomed over 180,000 migrants, most of whom are still waiting to be granted asylum status.
On Monday, hundreds of people turned out to the funeral of a man who died during last week's student protests in Niger. The rally over student study conditions and living standards turned violent and forced the closure of the country's top university. Now, it's recently reopened, but tensions remain, as Nicholas Schumau tells us.
Thousands of people attended the funeral of Mala Bagali. This student was killed last week during protests about better working conditions at Niamey University. The authorities said he died after a bad fall. An investigation has been launched, but student unions said Mala Bagali died after being hit by a police tear gas canister. His friends are distraught.
We are so sad the student was killed simply because he was defending his rights. It's deplorable in a state which says it respects the rule of law.
The authors of this crime have still not admitted it. They took him away from us. Now, let him rest in peace, and we ask God to welcome him in paradise.
In a separate incident, 3 police officers were arrested after a video posted on social media showed security forces beating up a student during the protest. On Saturday, Niger's President Mahamadou Issoufou met with student leaders to try and reduce tensions. Niamey University campus was later reopened. But at Mala Bagali's funeral, his friends said they wanted the president to make a public apology.
Now, over the last 6 months or so, tens of thousands of people have been forced out of their homes in the Lagos community of Otodo Gbame. The most recent mass eviction happened earlier this month, despite a court order that it stop. Critics of the policy accused the state of taking advantage of its poorest and most vulnerable citizens in a land grab meant to benefit the wealthy. Our correspondents report.
Keep it together in front of the children. Benono Zosi repeats the phrase to herself like a mantra since her house was demolished and she was forced to take refuge in the Makoko district with her family. She struggles to support them as she now has nowhere to smoke and sell fish.
Since we were expelled, we're completely lost. Everywhere hurts. The children no longer go to school. There's no place to lie down, we don't have any money, and my children just roam around.
Last October, Lagos state government announced plans to demolish all waterfront slums, home to around 300,000 people, for security and environmental reasons. 30,000 people were forced from Otodo Gbame last November. 2,000 more were driven away by police this month. Many fled by boat, taken by surprise by a dawn raid. Dozens of families were forced out onto the lagoon after their houses were burnt to ash.
I was born in Ototdo Gbame in Lagos. My father was also born here. I grew up in this community. My own children were born here. Just let me live in my community. I just want to live in Ototdo Gbame.
In January, the High Court ordered demolitions to stop and mediation to start, but Lagos State kept up the destruction of waterfront homes anyway. The court can do little more against the governor's eviction policy as he enjoys immunity from prosecution. Over a dozen people have been killed in the expulsions, with one man fatally shot in the April demolitions. Those driven from their homes feel angry and betrayed.
We cannot continue to live like this. All the poor people in Lagos State, you must come together. You must fight for your rights. We are part of Lagos. Nobody can take us out of Lagos.
Our request to interview the governor went unanswered. Rights groups suspect the demolitions are being forced through to make way for the construction of luxury homes.
Well, Durban's beaches are known as a must-see for tourists visiting the South African city, but its urban centre has a little less inviting reputation. Parts of the city are notorious for its neglected buildings and violent gang wars. Authorities are making an effort to clean up some aspects of Durban's image, but it's a makeover with a ways to go. Take a look.
Sakile Malongo is painting life back into Durban's city centre. The artist is part of a project to make South Africa's biggest port town more attractive to both residents and businesses.
Instead of just seeing all these grey or yellow painted buildings, you see something that moves you and something that's saying something to you and something that speaks to you, something that brings life to the city.
The end of apartheid in 1994 led to an exodus of wealthier residents. Working class communities were left with a grim legacy: abandoned buildings, violent gangs and standstill traffic. Now Durban's authorities are on a mission to reinvent the city centre.
We've taken the models of good practice from other cities and we've looked at our own city and say, what do we need to do to turn the city around? How do we create jobs for young people? How do we use the creative industries? How do we stop flight of tenants that are businesses from the city centre to other parts of the city?
Several empty warehouses have been transformed into spaces for small businesses and restaurants. The project aims to woo potential investors, modernising the centre and making it a safer area.
I think it's a great concept in making the city alive again and making it more attractable to the locals, because the locals themselves aren't happy with it.
There are also plans to modernise the city's public transport and build a new skyscraper. But it will take decades for Durban to realise its ambitions, faced with severe financial constraints. Last month, the city lost the right to host the 2022 Commonwealth Games because it simply couldn't afford it.
And Kenya came out ahead in the Boston Marathon on Monday. Geoffrey Kirui won the 121st edition of the event to give Kenya its first men's win there in 5 years. Edna Kitbagat also swept to victory in the women's event, both athletes logging their triumph on their first time in the competition. Kiplagat, who's also notched up wins in London, New York and LA, belted past the finish line in 2 hours, 21 minutes and 52 seconds. Kirui's win was clinched in just 2 hours, 9 minutes and 37 seconds. Congratulations to them both. Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks very much for joining us. Do so again. Take care.
Mm-hmm.